How's it going, everybody? So I'm a class of 14.
Okay.
I majored in economics, and then I did the 3-2 program,
Okay.
so I went to Columbia
Okay.
and studied chemical engineering, which is great. So I'm going to try and provide a little bit of a data perspective on some of the current
Okay.
policy that the
Okay,
administration
I'll
has
let
just
you-
passed recently. Okay, first I wanted to start off with some quotes from former ASCMC President Aditya Pai, class of 13. So social life distinguishes our college from other top-tier liberal arts colleges, and it also distinguishes our students from their students. It's what makes us the happiest college in America, and it's critical to preparing ourselves for social careers in business, government, etc. And of course, it's a central part of the mission for our school. So let's talk a little bit about the policy that was recently passed at the beginning of this year, the High-Risk Alcohol and Drug Use Prevention Program. Now, this program has some good components of it that I think are going to be effective. It does a lot to enrich student experiences. It provides pathways for education and training, and of course, counseling, accountability, and enforcement. But it also has some limits that it's placed for the first time in the school's 70-year history on informal gatherings of students. And it places restrictions on time. It places restrictions on place, so no more than 15 people can gather in an informal setting where alcohol is present. You're only allowed to do this in residential areas, so no North Quad, no Parents Field, etc. You can't have, they establish drinking limits, whether you're a 225-pound football linebacker or a 110-pound freshman. Also, no drinking games allowed, except for the beer pong rule, the beer pong exception, which is allowed in select outdoor areas. So let's go ahead and look at what justified these policies. First of all, this is all coming from the report. In 2010, 13.9% of CMC respondents reported having used drugs other than alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana in a 30-day period. And in 2014, that number was 17.8%, and the administration says that this is an increase in 28%. And if you're like me, you're thinking, wow, by the end of the decade, everyone's going to be an alcoholic at school, But if you delve a little bit deeper into the data, you'll see that things aren't quite what they seem on the surface. So you can see 13.8% of national students have exhibited the same behavior, but you also see that 21% of men versus 9.5% of females, right? And that's not 13.8% isn't a perfect average, because 37% of NCHA respondents are male and 63% were female. So if you kind of recalibrate these percentages, you'll see in 2010, actually CMC had a lower percentage of people engaging in these behaviors than the national average, and furthermore, in 2014, it was less than a percentage point above the national average. Now, if you look at the sample size of what they'd need to achieve in order to get super accurate comparisons on this, you'd see that for a 4% margin of error, which is about the difference between the 2014-2010 numbers, at a 95% confidence level, which is what you'd see in most national polling, you'd need 411 respondents. Now, I happened to see a copy of this report this morning, and there were only 193 respondents. So basically, what I'm saying is that these numbers could be totally due to sampling error. So kind of discount that accordingly. The next statement, which was a little shocking, was that CMC students are blacking out more often, having hangovers, performing poorly on assignments, and being taken advantage of sexually more than their peers. If you're like me, you're looking at this and saying something's wrong. This is not okay. But you got to go and delve in a little bit deeper, right? So this is the EverFi sample that they're getting this data from. This is USC's, for example. And you can see here that, first of all, the sample is taken within the first month of your freshman year of college. So basically, right after you're let off the leash, your first time away from your parents, your first taste of Friedman, of course, freedom, you're going at it hard, obviously. But it's not representative of, the mature drinking behaviors of, the rest of the school, right? Also, that says there's a little note down there that says percentages correspond to 2 through 7 on the Likert scale. Now this is an example of a Likert scale here. It's not frequency, but it's the same kind of idea. So anything 2 to 7 they include in that percentage. Now what really matters here isn't necessarily the 2 to 7 divide, it's more the distribution of Likert scale scores, and so what would be great is if the administration could show us what CMC's distribution looks like compared to the national average, because if most of them are 2s and the national average has all 5, 6s, and 7s, then you can see that CMC is actually possibly doing a better job of controlling these behaviors than the national average, so it would be good to see that kind of data. Next, you can see that 100% of CMC students who disclosed they've been sexually assaulted were intoxicated, 80% for people who were assaulted. And of course, anything above 0 people being sexually assaulted is not okay. But to blame their behavior on alcohol, I don't think does the school any favors, right? We need to hold these people accountable, use education to teach them how to behave in situations where they're going to be intoxicated. Otherwise, you're not going to attack the core issue of the problem, right? Now, the next piece of evidence is that there were $51,000 in dorm damages last year, which is a lot. And but it's important to say, and somehow it says that these were linked to alcohol use, which is tricky because I don't think when people break things, they go around leaving little notes saying, "Sorry, I was drunk." But they also say that Stark had the fewest amount of damages with $247. But of course, I bet you Allen and Fawcett also have really low damage charges because they're in South Quad. I mean, no one goes in there, right? Now, you can also look at this and see, well, maybe it's not just CMC students that the administration cares about, but it's perception. So, for example, the admin said that 1 out of 10 high school students who was admitted didn't enroll because of excessive alcohol and partying. But if you look at the admission statistics, it doesn't look like it's hurting CMC any. They have the lowest acceptance rate and the highest yield. And no doubt it's because students love the social scene and the social policy at the school, right? You can see Pomona by there, next spot down. Also, you can also see that, if you take 10% of the people that were admitted, 50% yield, so 5% of the people that were surveyed said they didn't like the alcohol policy, so 0.5% of the people that applied didn't like the policy. Well, it's not a good idea to change your policy for the 0.5% of people that didn't come here, right? You want to respect the 1,300 or so students that you have here currently. And also, if you look at the high school rankings in U.S. News and World Report, CMC again, 4.5, just below Williams and Wellesley, and Pomona, 4.4. Sucks. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I want to get to the data. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to look at Clery Act data. So basically the Clery Act was passed in order to give schools a framework for reporting data on sexual assaults, drug violations, alcohol violations. And this is some longitudinal data for CMC in the 5 Cs from 99 to 2013. And you can see somewhere in 2005, 2006, something happened. We don't actually know, I don't actually know what that is, probably some kind of policy enforcement change or something like that. But the numbers really took off. And ironically enough, for the rest of the colleges, you'd expect to see, when a policy is implemented, an immediate spike and then a trail off, right? Because the policy is taking effect, people are getting used to it and starting to obey the rules. Ironically, you see that at CMC, but not for the rest of the 5 Cs, right? Which have more strict alcohol policies. Same thing for drug abuse, right? For drug abuse judicial referrals, CMC in the low single digits, and the other Claremont colleges are, 70, 80, 100. You can see a breakdown here, 70, 80, 90% of these referrals in the last 3 years came from outside CMC, with Pomona and Pitzer leading the charge, Scripps in third. And then you can see for drug law referrals, again, Pomona winning, Pitzer close second. I think that's surprising. And then Scripps was in third place with 8, and CMC, of course, last. Forcible sexual offenses, also, you can see CMC is in the, counts for about a third when you consider the fact that Harvey Mudd is mostly male and Scripps is mostly female. It's kind of a good breakdown. Obviously, anything above 0 is not okay, but it's not as exaggerated as I think a lot of the other schools would have you believe. Those are reported, correct. Now, these are also forcible sexual offenses reported for 2011 to 2013 for the other top 10 liberal arts colleges. Again, you can see CMC down at the other corners, Swarthmore and Amherst, which have tougher alcohol policies up at the top. Liquor law judicial referrals. Again, CMC down at the bottom here. You can see Bowdoin, which outlawed hard liquor in 95. My alma mater, Columbia, Pomona way up there, Amherst, etc. You might think Swarthmore and Carleton were doing a good job, but actually they just offloaded the judicial referrals to the police department. So these are liquor law arrests in the past 3 years. You can see CMC again, way low down there. Drug law referrals, same story. CMC just above BYU. I added that for context. And again, Bowdoin, Middlebury, Pomona, all up there in the last 3 years. And drug law arrests, Carleton, BYU. That's surprising. But you can see CMC basically is, pretty far down on the totem pole there. So, in conclusion, I want to say that most of the students at CMC handle their freedom responsibly, right? There's probably about 1% or something that don't follow the rules, and it's this percent that needs to be more, heavily kicked out of school, basically. But don't implement policies. They're going to adversely affect the 99% of students that are perfectly capable of handling their own lives and their own drinking behaviors. And that's my talk. Thank you very much. Please ask me some questions.